What's up, guys? Welcome back to Zilla MMA. I am your host, as always, the Zilla. Want to start this episode as I always do, and that's by thanking you guys, the viewers. Really can't do this without you. Please appreciate every subscriber. Please go like and subscribe. Leave comments with your picks for this upcoming card. Love hearing the picks from you guys. Love hearing suggestions about the show as well. We've been trying to make some modifications lately. We've been changing things up a little bit, just trying to figure out what works best. Obviously, like we added the Lawson's Lock segment, which is going really well. Love having Lawson on the show. We'll have him later on in the program. But we're trying to mix up a lot of things. I've been starting to try and do my recaps as a part of this episode, maybe cutting to one episode a week. Maybe we end up adding episodes. I really don't know what the best format is for this yet, but we're still pretty young in doing this, so we're trying a few different things out. We'll see what works, see what you guys like. But if you have suggestions, feel free, leave them down in the comments. And one of the main things I really want to work on is the type of picks that I'm giving you guys. So we're going to go ahead. First, I'm going to give you a recap of where we stand so far in 2024. So obviously not ideal. It's not great. Went 6-7-1 last week. That's 18-17-1 in total on the year. UFC being a sport that it's not even money, each side of fights. That's not a great number. 2-2-1 in green plays. Those top line plays that I give you last week, again, not good. I like those to be one loss at most on those. 5-3 on the year on those. Lawson's Lock, obviously our most profitable. Up to this point, 1-0 last week, 2-0 on the year, up 1.54 units since the beginning of the program. Parlay missed last week. We'll get into that here in a second. Both dogs missed, 1-2 on PrizePicks. So obviously it doesn't look very good on paper. And on the year we are down 4.19 units in the picks I've given on the show, which isn't horrific. It's not something you can't dig yourself out of. That's really not the worst thing in the world. But I'm trying to figure out what picks I should be giving on the show, because I throw together a bunch of smaller parlays myself. I don't necessarily... I do bet anything that I give on the show, but I have a lot of other things I bet as well, and I feel like I'm not getting the right things on the show. I also don't want to overload you guys with picks, though. So I'm trying to figure out what the ideal way to do this. In reality, myself, just being completely transparent, betting on UFC this year, I'm down about 1.5 units, which is way better than 4.19. And so I'm going to be working on that. I might tweak with it a little bit. Right now, this week we're going to continue. I only have one dog this week. I have 2 parlays I'm going to give you, and then we have Lawson's Lock, and then obviously the green plays at the top of the card. But just going back and looking at this card, just a few fights away from this being pretty solid. Starting with that main event, with Pfeiffer. It went for a while. The whole fight actually went how we would have expected it to go. Pfeiffer wins those first 2 rounds, which is what we expected. We expected him to put a beating on Hernandez. But the hope was that he was going to get him out in those 2 rounds. He's not able to do that. He takes a punch in the third round, where he's already clearly starting to fall off a little bit, where he gets hit in the eye, and it really bothers him. Never really fully recovers. 3rd and 4th round, he clearly loses. 5th round, he comes back a little bit. He's got a shot in the 5th round, but I still had Hernandez winning slightly before the takedown, and once Hernandez got him to the ground, that round became obvious as well. Not completely out on the guy. This was a bit of a check for him. Needs to work on mixing up his shots better, changing his game plan on the fly. Hernandez was able to figure him out and really start countering what he was putting forward. But he seems like, I know the volume slowed down. He seems like he can be a 5-round fighter. He still has power, just was not able to get Hernandez out of there. So I don't want to fully give up on the guy. I don't want to go too hard on him here. I don't think this is the end for him. I don't know how far he can get at this point. We'll have to see how he takes this and what he goes on and how he develops from this. But I'm not completely out on the guy. I had a few where we looked really good on this card. Poteria, obviously, we hit as a dog. RoboCop was someone we were all over. Michael Johnson comes out, uses wrestling surprisingly. I'll talk about a little bit about that with Lawson during his walk. Try and talk to him about that, but that was his walk of the week. He's able to go out there and get that. I mean, from the start of the card, we looked pretty good going through those first 3 fights. Get a dog in the 3rd fight of the night in Guskov that we got right. And then things just kind of, came apart a little bit for us when Wells loses that split decision. I thought Wells fought the better fight, but I can't be mad at them for not giving it to him. He didn't go out there and fight a fight where I really feel like he got burned, He's a very explosive fighter. He can get you to the ground. He can hit you with big shots. And for some reason, he was very content staying on the outside and not really using that to his advantage. And so we take the loss there. If that split decision goes the other way, if Pyfer's able to get that knockout, we're talking about a completely different night, a really up big night. But we're not. And so that's where we are now. But with all that being said, the past 2 weeks going into these cards, we talked about it going into these cards. I said, I don't feel great about these cards. There's a lot of close fights. There's a lot of stuff I don't feel good about. And this is why I might start giving out, more information on units to bet and everything as well on the show. This whole learning process on how to relay information. But we had talked about how we didn't love these fights. There was a lot of 50-50 stuff. This is a card where I feel like we can get back on track, a card where I really do feel good about some stuff on this card. And we'll go ahead and start getting into that, guys. So let's go ahead and start looking at UFC 298. So our first fight of the card is going to be Andrea Lee versus Miranda Maverick. Maverick coming in here as the favorite at -185. Maverick being someone I was really high on when she first joined the UFC. I really had a lot of faith in her. Thought she was a very talented prospect. Thought she had the skills and style to compete for a title, in the UFC at some point in her career. Not necessarily right off the bat, but sitting here 4 years later, it's pretty clear at this point it's just not who she is. But we don't really need to worry about that now. The question is, can she win this fight? And she, I've really gotten away from wanting to bet her in recent fights just because of being burned by her. And looking at Andrea Lee, obviously a seasoned vet in the UFC at this point, but she's on a 3-fight losing streak where she just hasn't really looked all that good. Granted, I do believe Maverick would also struggle against any of the 3 fighters she's faced. It kind of makes this one a tough one to call, but stylistically, I think this has to benefit Maverick. She should, in theory, be able to use her wrestling to control this fight. I just don't know how much I can trust her. She'll be the pick here, but it's going to be pretty low in my confidence rankings. Not a fight that I'm wild about for sure. Talking about trying to get back on the right track, this is probably not the place to start. Moving into our next fight, we've got Val Woodburn versus Oban Elliot. Elliot, the -300 favorite here. In my opinion, neither of these guys are quite UFC caliber, and they both kind of have weird roads to get here. Woodburn took a super short notice fight, one where he was really sent to slaughter against Bo Nickel, put right on a pay-per-view. Literally could find no one else at that point to fight, and so you got to give the guy props for that. A lot of guys will not step up into that spot. This guy realized the opportunity he was going to get to come out and fight in the UFC and took advantage of it. But also, that being said, he's the first guy to really make Bo Nickel look like a polished striker and finisher on the feet. I guess there's an argument that Bo has always had that, and that this was the first time that he'd really had an opportunity to display it. Also, the argument this guy had less than a week to prepare, and you're expecting him to come out and wrestle, and then all of a sudden he's in your face and striking, and you're not prepared for that. There's an argument for that as well, that he may have been caught off guard, but regardless, it's not a great look if we're being honest. Elliot on the other side was brought in from the Contender Series, a rare decision win selection from the Contender Series. We don't see that all that often. He certainly didn't look bad, but didn't do anything really overly impressive to me, so a little bit surprised to see him get a contract. Elliot should be more technically skilled, I suppose, but at minus 300, I'm just not sure I can back him, to be honest. The striking of Woodburn is wild and sloppy, and I don't think he's going to last that long, but he definitely has the power to be able to go out there and get a knockout here. So certainly not a fight I'm interested in betting. It's going to be, I can almost guarantee it's going to be my lowest confidence pick of the card, but I'll take Woodburn for the purposes of this show. I think if you're going to bet on this one, if you can find a problem on the under, that might not be a bad bet, but I also don't mind a very small bet on Woodburn by knockout at some kind of elevated number. So give me Woodburn in this spot. I'll take him by KO. Probably the only really big dog like that I'm going to be looking at all night, and still not one that I'm wild about. On to the next one, we have Josh Quinlan versus Danny Barlow. Barlow minus 200. I actually really like what I've seen from Barlow. Really solid striker with a ton of power. Super long guy. He's going to have an 8-inch reach advantage in this fight. Only 2 inches taller than Quinlan as well, and comes in with an 8-inch reach advantage. Crazy reach for this guy. Quinlan gives him trouble if he decides to use his wrestling, but everything I've seen, this is likely to play out on the feet, in which case I just think Barlow is the better fighter here. Honestly, I'm expecting another highlight knockout for Barlow. Probably one of my more confident picks on the card after going and watching this tape. So I'm going to take Barlow in this fight, and I will take him by KO. Moving into our next fight, Mingyang Zhang versus Bredson Ribeiro. Zhang minus 130 here. Definitely should be some fireworks in this one. Got some really cool stats on this on this fight. Between these two fighters, their last 18 fights have been finished within the first round. Zhang has never seen a decision in his 22-fight career. Just unreal numbers between these guys. Looking at the tape, I just like what I've seen from Ribeiro more. The record of Zhang is completely fraudulent. In his 9-fight winning streak, he fought rematches with 2 of the opponents, so he's only faced 7 opponents in those 9. Both of those opponents having losing records. The total records between the 7 fighters he's beaten on this streak, 40 and 41. And some of these guys he lost to, granted a little earlier in his career, are just complete bums. I'm much more impressed with the opposition that Ribeiro has faced, and on top of that, I think there are just more elements to his game. I think the striking is somewhat close between the two, but if this finds a way to get to the ground, I almost certainly favor him. A dangerous one to bet with 2 finishers like this, but I'll take Ribeiro here as a slight dog. I'll take him by knockout. Next up, we have Rinya Nakamura versus Carlos Vera. Nakamura, the minus 1100 favorite in here, just an enormous favorite. Just a clear prop-up spot on this card. This is really the only one they have on here, but the UFC needed someone to fill the spot against Nakamura after High Stand pulled out. So in comes Carlos Vera. He's making his UFC debut at 36 years old. Kind of should tell you everything you need to know. And you know what? Congratulations to him on achieving a dream that the majority of fighters never even get close to. Unfortunately, he's just not on the level of Nakamura. This isn't going to go well for him. I expect Nakamura to be physically dominant. It should primarily grapple, I would think. I think he will be able to get the finish here, get on the neck and get the finish inside the distance. I hope that Vera has a deal worked out here. I hope he gets another shot at his UFC dream against a more realistic opponent, but I do not expect this one to go his way. I'm going to take Nakamura in this spot by submission. Next up, we've got Marcos Rodrigo de Lima versus Justin Tafa. De Lima, the minus 145 favorite in this fight. 2 guys where I don't know how you can feel good no matter which one you have your money on. De Lima getting up there in age, and we know he has a limited gas tank. We got gifted that dog money on Derek Lewis against him the last time they fought. Just absolutely great for us. And we saw that durability may be an issue for him at this point as well. But, you know, Tafa's certainly not Derek Lewis, so I don't know if that's necessarily a fully fair comparison. And I'm not 100% sure we can trust his gas tank either. Striking is probably a little better than Lima, I would think. It's not by a ton. Uh, you also have to worry about the only big difference between these two, in my opinion, and that's that Lima has a wrestling advantage, a grappling advantage that could be a little concerning. I think there's a good chance that one of these guys get the other out of here early, though, probably in the first round. And for me, if that is what's going to happen, it's going to be a knockout coming from Tafa. I'm just too worried about the age, the durability, and I hate to say things like this, but maybe even the heart of Lima after that last fight. I will have to maintain the concern that Lima could end up lying on top of Tafa if this fight goes too long, And Tafa's only really fought cans to this point, so we haven't seen that element of his game challenged just yet, but I'm hoping he'll be able to get the finish fairly early here, and we won't have to find out. So I'm going to take Tafa in this spot, and I'm going to take him by knockout. Next up, we have Amanda Lemos versus Mackenzie Dern. Lemos here, the favorite at -130. I understand being a little bit deterred from betting on Mackenzie after her last fight. I think it's completely reasonable. And, that performance against Jessica Andrade, obviously not ideal, but I think this line may be a little bit too much of an overcorrection. There's certainly plenty of flaws in Dern's game. Her striking has improved, but not nearly to the level we had hoped going into her last fight. And she struggles to wrestle, which is kind of difficult when, the best element of your game is your jiu-jitsu. But this isn't a fight where she's facing a dominant technical striker or a big physical presence that she's going to struggle with. Someone that she's not going to be capable of taking down. I don't see that here. I think, I think those are the main people that she has lost to, and I don't really see those elements coming back against her in this fight. Going up against a solid striker for sure, but I don't see her dominating Mackenzie on the feet, and she's got a very questionable takedown defense. Skill on the ground isn't great, so even if Dern really needs to, go out there and pull guard, which is obviously not ideal, I think she can get this fight to where she wants it. Now, if Dern does struggle to dictate where the fight takes place and starts eating big shots, then, this could be another rough night for her, but I don't see it going that way. I think Dern's going to be able to get this to the ground and fight the fight she wants to fight, so I'm going to take Dern in this fight, and I will take her by submission. Next up, we have Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov. Hernandez, the -215 favorite in this fight. Kopylov's certainly impressive as of late after, a pretty rough start to his UFC career. Comes in here on a 4-fight winning streak, and it's hard not to love what you've seen from a striking standpoint. If this stays on the feet and he can keep Fluffy at range, I think he's got a really good shot. But I just don't think that's how this is going to go. Hernandez is going to pressure him from the jump, and I don't think he's going to allow him to fight that comfortable fight that he's going to want. He's going to use chain wrestling, dictate where the fight takes place. We've seen him do it before against pretty high-level competition. While this is probably the best opponent, I would say that Kopylov's fought to this point. I'm going to side with Fluffy to take him down. I think he's going to be able to get the job done here, so the pick is going to be Hernandez, and I will take him by submission. Next up, really tough fight. We have Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. Dvalishvili -200 in this fight. There's not a fight on this card that I've been more back and forth on this week. I really can't make up my mind. I love Cejudo. I think he's one of the greatest martial artists we've ever seen. I think there isn't an opponent at 125 or 135 that he can't at least compete with. But I'm pretty concerned about this matchup. I think it could be pretty difficult for him. I really, I don't like the style of Merab, but you can't say it's not effective. Absolutely relentless. He's almost always either throwing or shooting a takedown. Just every second of the fight, he's in your face. and he's capable of doing it for 5 rounds we've seen now, let alone 3, which is always going to need to do it for in this fight. Cejudo has the striking and the wrestling to compete with him. That doesn't really concern me, but the relentless pressure that this guy puts on, it's almost impossible to even train for. You have to have multiple guys fight individual rounds. There's no one like him. I feel like unless Henry can land the big shot or find a way to land takedowns of his own somehow, he's going to be fighting off the back foot probably the entire fight. I don't think this is going to be fun or entertaining, but I think Merab will keep using those constant takedown attempts and throw Henry off his game plan and control him throughout the fight. And so, unfortunately, as much as I wanted to get to Henry as a dog, I think the pick is going to have to be Merab here. I'm going to take him by decision. Next up, we've got Jeff Neal versus Ian Garry. Garry, the minus 225 favorite coming into this fight. And, I've hated I've hated Ian Garry since before it was cool to hate Ian Garry. Never really bought into his second coming of Conor shtick he tried to put on, and now that all his personal issues have come to light, it's pretty clear this guy's an all-around fraud. Kind of what I had assumed from the start. No question he's going to carry resentment against the fans and the media for putting his personal life on display. And, who knows what kind of issues he's had with training, with no camp really wanting him. This guy's life's been a complete mess from an outsider's perspective. And, don't let anyone tell you that doesn't affect these fighters. I really believe it does. And so that could play a factor here. It really could. The question is that going to be enough to outweigh the skill gap between him and Jeff Neal? Now, I haven't discussed it with him, but I know Lawson has similar feelings about Garry. And, I know he sees him as a fraud and overrated, and I have a good feeling this could be his lock of the week. And that kind of makes this even harder to do, because I personally hate the guy, and I know Lawson hates the guy, and I know I haven't been with Lawson on his lock of the week. So I hope that either he is able to convince me to flip, or I am wrong about this being his lock of the week. But I've watched the tape, I've listened to the commentary, I've done the research as much as I can think to do, and I just can't in good conscience tell you to take Jeff Neal here. It's just too perfect of a matchup for Garry. Neal just being a pretty pure boxer. He wants to get on the inside and force his opponent to throw down with him. But unfortunately, I think Garry might be a little too smart for that. I think he does a good job staying on the outside, picking his spots, landing his kicks, building up damage. I'd be much more concerned if he was fighting an opponent that had a takedown threat that could force Garry out of his comfort zone. It's why I really kind of like the original matchup he was going to have with Luque. We might be talking about something else, maybe potentially him getting fraud checked if that were the case, but I just don't see it here. I just don't. And I honestly am really hoping that, I'm hoping this is Lawson's lock and he can somehow convince me to flip, because there is really, no one wants to pick Ian Garry. No one wants to pick against him more than I do. But for now, he's going to have to be the pick. And I'm going to take Garry by KO in this spot unless this is Lawson's lock and he can convince me otherwise. Next up, we're going to go to Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. Whittaker, the minus 225 favorite in this fight. I think Whittaker should be the better technical fighter in just about every department, and I think you'll find very few people that disagree with that. That doesn't really make this fight a slam dunk, in my opinion. There's certainly some questions about Whittaker at this point of his career. We've seen him lose 2 of the last 3, obviously against 2 of the best fighters in the division, but there were certainly some durability questions that came out of those fights. Maybe some that we should have been asking a little sooner, if we're being honest. He also really seems to struggle with the physicality of Duplessis in their last fight, and facing another fighter who's just a physical specimen. I'm not saying that he necessarily uses it well, but he is certainly a physical specimen. So looking at Paulo Costa, that could give you some concern. Now that being said, I don't see Paulo Costa as anything close to the talent that Dricus du Plessis is. And I think there are far more questions about Costa than Whittaker if we look at it. For starters, will durability even really matter for Whittaker? In the last fight Costa had, it was against Luke Rockhold, a fighter who saw a decision for the first time, I believe, in his 10-year UFC career. And what does Costa still have at this point? To be honest, he's pulled out of so many fights. Most people still doubt this fight's even going to happen, even this late in the week. We haven't seen him in a year and a half, and we haven't seen him get a finish in over 5 years, close to 6 at this point, I believe. So this is a fight, just like any other fight, anything can happen, but I really feel that all signs are pointing to Whittaker. Just fighting a smarter and more technical fight and being able to avoid any of the danger that Costa could potentially bring, I guess. But I'm going to trust Whittaker in this spot to bounce back, not facing the top-tier talent, in my opinion. I'm going to take Whittaker in this fight by decision. And finally, we made it. We are at the main event, a very big main event, a main event we've been waiting on for a long time. It's Alexander Volkanovski versus Elliot Topuria. Volk coming in, it's moving around a lot. I've seen it at minus 115, all the way down to minus 105, got all the way up to minus 130. It seems like it's even back out around minus 115. I realized the talent of Topuria more earlier than a lot of people did. I'm a huge Ryan Hall fan, and so I saw him beat the beating he put on him, and he kind of got put on my radar. But I still recognize Hall as a pretty one-dimensional fighter, so I didn't put too much stock into it. I recognized that this guy might have some talent, but was not the title contender or anything like that at that point. Kind of the same thing with Bryce Mitchell. I backed Topuria in that spot because I thought it was a good matchup for him, and he went out there, got the job done. But again, as impressive as that is, clearly some limitations in Mitchell's game, so you can't put way too much stock into it. But the win over Josh Emmett, that's when I really fully realized how talented this guy is. I mean, he's clearly one of the top guys in the weight class. He's fully deserving of this title shot. You really can't say a negative thing about this guy. But he's no Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, come on, guys. What are we really doing with this line? I mean, I don't know what I'm looking at here. We're really calling it quits on one of the best fighters we've ever seen. One of the best fighters we've ever seen. Because he lost a short notice fight on less than a week's notice, moving up a weight class against the pound for pound champion of the world. We're calling it a retirement for Volk because of that. It's just crazy to me. I don't understand it. We haven't really even seen him challenged yet at 145. People seem to forget what he did to Yair very quickly. Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get why people are so quick to turn on him. I don't need to sit here and explain how great of a striker he is, and how good of a wrestler he is, and how great his cardio is, and how amazing his fight IQ is, and how we've never seen a fighter continue to improve their game for as long as he has, how he can make changes on the fly, how he can fight you in almost any way that he wants to and win fights at 145, and almost win fights at 155, almost take the belt off Makhachev. In my opinion, should have in the first fight. This guy's resume speaks for itself. If you want to bet against that, be my guest. But until this guy shows some vulnerability at 145, he's my guy. Pick's going to be Volkanovski by decision. I will throw one caveat into that, and it's that I want to see how he looks on the scale. I'm not overly concerned about this, but after what we saw in the last fight, after what we heard in the press conferences, after we saw where he was mentally, I want to see that he's back to Volkanovski. And I think he is. Everything I've seen that indicates it. That everything I've seen indicates that he is going to be back to his full self. But I'm not going to completely hammer this until I see that. So again, pick is Volkanovski. Keep an eye on him on the scale. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move into our bets. All right, so we'll start with our confidence rankings here. Nakamura, obviously as close to a lock as you're going to get in this sport. Should be able to go out and get the win here. So in my number one spot. Feel very good about Volk as well. Whittaker, I think, is the better all-around fighter pretty much everywhere than Costa. And then really like what I've seen from Barlow. I know we don't have a lot of film on him yet, but I think he's going to be able to get it done. So those are my 4 green plays this week. Feel pretty good about the yellows too. Garry and Hernandez, both very good fighters, guys that I'm going to have built into some parlays of my own. And then Ribeiro coming off the bottom of those as a dog play that I think is a very solid dog play. A lot of money coming in on him though. May not be a dog by the time that fight gets off. So get on that one as soon as you can. The 5 below that, there's good and bad that I have with him. Dvalishvili, obviously, a guy who's very talented, so you feel good backing that guy. But going against Henry Cejudo, how confident can you really feel? Tafa, same thing. Those heavy guys in there swinging could get knocked out at any moment. So tough guy to back too hard. Maverick and Dern, the 2 women fights where kind of feel like those could go either way. And then Woodburn, our very big dog down there at the bottom. If you're going to bet him, just a small flyer. Don't recommend big money on that fight. Moving into our bets, we're going to keep the similar format. Like I said, this week I'm going to give you 2 parlays. We're going to go Nakamura and Volk. Nakamura, like I said, is close to a lock as you're going to get. If you were like me and feel very good about Volk, especially if he looks good on the scale, getting that at even money, I think, is a really good bet. So I'm going to be on that. Then Whittaker and Barlow, like I said, really like Whittaker, really like Barlow. These are my green plays. All of those coming out of my green plays this week. Can get that at plus 110. And then the best dog on the card in Ribeiro, in my opinion, getting him straight at plus 110. I just see a lot of value there. I think this is a good combination of bets this week. I feel really good about these, much better than I have in the past few weeks. So that is what we're going with on that. And then as far as PrizePicks, I normally like to get you guys 3 plays on PrizePicks. It's the way I normally operate on this. But I didn't want to force one in that I wasn't, as confident in as these two. These 2 I really like. Merab over 3.5 takedowns. Doesn't do a good job controlling them. Doesn't do a good job keeping people down once he gets those takedowns, but he's relentless. Keeps shooting them. Gets a ton of takedowns in his fights. I think he will get at least 3.5 takedowns in this fight, regardless of if he wins or loses, in my opinion. I think that's probably how this is going to go down. And then Nakamura really wants to come out, prove that he can get finishes out here. I know he's going to be working hard for a finish in this fight. So I don't see this going the complete 2 rounds. I'm going to take under 9.75 minutes in that fight. But yeah, some bets that I feel pretty good about this week. I think we are in a good spot for a good rebound. So now we've reached a segment I know you guys are all looking forward to. I'm looking forward to it. I want to know what Lawson is thinking this week. 2-0 coming up to this point. Hopefully he can make it 3-0 this week. Without further ado, Lawson's Lock of the Week. All right, so welcome back to another segment of Lawson's Lock of the Week, actively the most profitable segment on the show. We've had a couple tough weeks to start this year, but Lawson's Lock of the Week, there's no doubt about it. 2-0 to start off the segment. Really excited for Lawson. Love to have that on the show. Kept me afloat the past couple of weeks. Just been a rough run. But this is a card where I think we're really set up to get back on the right track, and I'm really excited to hear what you have for us today.
Absolutely. First, I want to start off by saying Darius Flowers is not a UFC fighter. He is horrendous. I mean, that last fight, that's kind of what I put into my to my assessment. I was kind of just fading him, and it worked. He is terrible.
Yeah, I tend to agree. A little unconventional for Johnson using the wrestling as heavily as he did. Not something that I really accounted for. Um, and I saw him. I don't know if you saw in the post press conference, he was telling DC F this wrestling thing. I don't know how you guys do this because he was
Yeah.
exhausted at the end. Um, but when he's just a veteran, man, he watched the tape. He knew where he could take advantage of the guy. He knew that this guy was kind of dangerous, at least for a short amount of time on the feet, and he completely neutralized it and using that wrestling. So that's just one of those spots where taking the veteran sometimes just pays off, and he showed why he's been in the UFC as long as he has.
Absolutely.
Um, but if you are ready, Lawson, we can go ahead. I've already discussed in the video. I have an idea of where you're going this week. Um, and I'll let you know what I think about it. If it is where you end up going, I'll let you know what I think about it after you give the pick. But we'll see where you go with this. So, Lawson, without further ado, lock of the week.
So, I was talking to you this week, 2-0, trying to keep it under minus 200. But this week, I want to even give myself a little bit more of a challenge. I decided to go with a dog that should come to absolutely no surprise to anybody that I'm taking him. Give me Justin Tafa.
Wow. Okay, this is not where I thought this was going. This is not at all where I was expecting this to go. So let me get to a different section of my notes so we can talk this over. Lawson, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing here.
Okay, so I went back, watched the film. You might have talked about the film. I wanted to fraud check Ian Garry. I don't think it's that much of a given. I think that he can win. So I'm going to switch it up. I'm
Lawson,
going.
I'll go ahead. But before you even go into this, I'm gonna go ahead and say this. It in my preview for the Ian Garry fight, I literally said I've done every bit of research I can to be able to take Jeff Neal here. I had to pick Ian Garry for the show, and I said I hope
Yeah,
Lawson comes in and convinces me of some way not to take him
no,
because
I
I
could.
don't want to take this guy. But it
I
doesn't make
could.
sense. It doesn't make sense.
No, it does.
I hate Ian Garry more than anyone in the world. I hated him before it was cool to hate him. And I don't see how he loses this fight, unfortunately. I searched for a way, I couldn't find it.
I went back. I watched a lot of tape to try to convince me of anything. Couldn't find one thing. So I had to do a little bit of a switch up, completely different. But I like my pick for a couple different reasons.
So this is one I've definitely gone back and forth on as well. There's a couple fights, and you'll see when it breaks down. The two fights that I've gone back and forth the most on this card would be this one, and then obviously the Merab Dvalishvili and Henry Cejudo fight. Two fights that are very difficult for me to break down this week. Um, and honestly, I could still really be swayed on this one, Lawson. I'd love to hear what you saw that you really liked this week.
So for starters, I think, Marcos de Lima, he's getting a little bit older. Last fight out against Derek Lewis, I mean, he took that flying knee. In like a few months after the fight, he talked about some of the the injuries that he dealt with, talking about how it loosened his teeth, loosened his gums up a little bit. It sounded like he was, I mean, pretty hesitant to want to get back in there, just kind of discussing all the injuries. I think that he might be scared. I think that there's a chance that he might, come back out and not want to get hit as hard. I also think that he could win this fight if he takes it to the ground. Tafa has never once been taken to the ground in the UFC, partially because his legs are the size of missiles. And I think in the end, I think Tafa can stuff the takedown. So if they're just going to stand up and bang it out the whole fight, I think Tafa catches them, can knock him out. But I do think that if De Lima can take it to the ground, then he can win. But I just don't see the fight going that way.
And so that's the one big separating factor that I saw between these two is the ground game of Delima, which is the reason I was finding it difficult to go the other way. The other thing obviously being you can look at age one of two ways, either that, Delima has the experience or that Delima is on the way out. I don't think you're under any illusion that Tafa is necessarily a good fighter. At least to this point. But that doesn't mean he can't win this spot. Like you said, uh, DeLima has shown a lot of hesitancy, in my opinion, as well, to get back in after that knockout by Derek Lewis. I mean, that was just absolutely brutal. Tafa hits like a ton of bricks too. That there's my another concern of mine, obviously, being Tafa's only really beaten Cairns to this point. Um, and the thing with the grappling game is I don't know if he is effective at preventing takedowns or if we just haven't seen someone of a caliber to be able to challenge him there yet. What do you think as far as that goes?
No, I agree completely. And I'm not saying that Tafa's beaten anyone good. I mean, one of his last 3 wins is against Hunsucker. So
Right.
I'm not saying that he's fought anyone
I
great.
think I think Porter's in there as well, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
well, um, but knocked the last 2 guys out. Like I think that he has the power to stand up there and knock out Lima. Like I said, if it goes to the ground, the ending could be very stark. But at plus odds with a guy who seems hesitant, if he catches them 1 or 2 times, that might just be it.
Yeah. I tend to agree. Yeah, like I said, I've gone back and forth. The grappling has concerned me. But you make some really good points about his hesitancy to get back in there, how brutal that last knockout is, how close he probably is to the end of his career. I think you're probably on the right side of this one, and I think I'm going to be going with that pick as well. So while I have you on the line, very appreciative, obviously, to get that pick. I like it a lot. Did you have anything else to say about that fight in particular before we move on?
Not that fight in particular. No, I think that's just about everything that's going in my mindset.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from on it, and I will. We were on the same side this week, um, so good to see that. Um, is there anything else from this card? I know in the process of finding this fight, you do some research throughout the card. Is there anything else that stands out to you throughout this card? Anything that would surprise anyone? Anyone that you feel really confident in that wasn't quite at the caliber of the lock for you?
Yeah, so I mean, you and I have talked about this off the mic a little bit, just about Volkanovski. I mean, no one's challenged him in this weight class. People, I think, are really weighing that last fight against Makachev pretty heavily, where I mean, he came out and who knows, he was the shell of a fighter of what he was. So he could definitely come out and win this fight pretty easily, especially at minus 130 odds.
And something I've talked about as well. I'm obviously very much on Volk. I believe he was my second most confident on my confidence rankings this week. But all of that is pending how he looks on the scale this week. If he comes
Completely.
out there and has that same flab that he was looking at 155, comes out there not looking his fully toned self, the guy that we've come to know and love and have backed with our money week in and week out. If he doesn't look like that guy, then I might have to back off this a little bit. I don't see myself getting to Topuria, but it may not be the smash play that I have it as right now. Um, because I'm giving him a lot of leeway because of all the circumstances of what came into that last fight. A lot of people just pay attention to the fact that he got knocked out. They don't realize the big payday he got to come into that fight. It wasn't just a 1 day payday. They restructured his entire contract to come in there. That fight changed his life, changed the life of his family for years to
Mm-hmm.
come.
Yep.
And it was something he felt like he needed to do when he wasn't in the right headspace, when he wasn't in his peak physical condition. He went in there against the pound for pound best fighter in the world, moving up a weight class, and and no matter what caliber fighter you are, putting yourself in a circumstance like that is setting yourself up for failure.
Agreed.
I don't anticipate his camp is going to let him do that coming into this fight. As long as he's coming off a full camp, he's prepared. He's preparing for the fighter that he's going in there to face. I don't particularly see Topuria any more dangerous than I saw Yair Rodriguez for him, and he utterly dismantled Rodriguez. So in my opinion, this is an obvious spot if Volkanovski comes out looking like Volkanovski.
I agree.
Um, anything else you saw?
Nope, that was the 2 big things. I mean, obviously a lot of heavy favorites I like, but
Sure. Yeah, it's a fairly heavy favorite part. I think I'm on 4, maybe 5 dogs, something around there. seven or eight favorites. Um, like I said, it might just be a week where, as much as we hate it, we might have to back Ian Garry here. I just don't see an
Might have
alternative. I
might
don't
have
see an alternative. Just a guy like this, where it's a guy who is pretty much a pure boxer that's going to want to get in the pocket with him. He's going to be able to keep it at a distance and pump out that jab and land those kicks. And man, this just isn't. If this was Vicente Luque like it was originally scheduled to be, we might be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
But I just don't see Jeff Neal getting this done. He's not going to be our savior from this guy. Still a fraud. Not changing my mind on that. Just the wrong matchup.
This is a win-win for us too. We can back Garry this week, and if he loses, we can be happy that he got fraud checked by a more inferior fighter.
Absolutely, one of those emotional hedges.
Yeah,
and obviously, like he's had trouble staying in camps. Like no one wants him in their camp. He has all this emotional stuff going on in the media. You don't know what kind of toll that takes on him as a fighter. So maybe he doesn't come out himself. I mean, that's always possible. But we'll have to wait and see. But going with Tafa as Lawson's lock of the week. I love it.
yep.
I love it. It wasn't what I was preparing for, but I'm glad to see it.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we get to 3-0 here, and we'll see you back here next week.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lawson.
Yep.
Thank you again, Lawson. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Definitely not what I was expecting from you this week, but I feel good about it. Think we had some good conversation, and I can't wait to see how all this pans out for us. Feeling really good about this card this week, guys. I really think this is a spot where we can hit some money. So, like I said, if you got some picks of your own, opinions of your own, please leave them down in the comments. But we really need your guys' support so we can keep growing this channel. Please subscribe. Please like these videos. It means the world to us. We're really trying to grow. We're talking about bringing in some new guests. Like I said, we're working on the formatting, how many videos we want to put out, what we want to put in the videos. But I think new guests is a great idea. Figuring out different types of bets we can give you is a good idea. If you have any ideas about that, leave it in the comments. But we're not going to do this without growing the subscribers. So please keep bringing in subscribers. Tell your friends. But yeah, guys, I'm feeling good about this one. I hope everything goes well. Good luck on all your bets. Until next time, guys. See ya.